Hello. I think it's time I can say good afternoon. My name is Mariette DiChristina. I'm the editor-in-chief of Scientific American, and I'll be your moderator today for our session on China's biotech revolution. I think you're in for a rare treat. We have some amazing experts here, which I will introduce in just a minute. But before I do that, just a little bit of framing for the session today. First of all, if you're not familiar with Scientific American, the magazine was started in 1845, and here in China has a translated edition produced by Global Science in Beijing. This session is being live streamed through the World Economic Forum site, so if you hear something that you want to hear again later, you'll be able to go ahead and watch that. And it is a collaborative session between Scientific American and the World Economic Forum, for which I am grateful. We have wonderful collaborations. Another collaboration that I just want to mention, because it will be released later today, is we produce a top 10 emerging technologies list between the World Economic Forum and Scientific American, using the Global Expert Network as curators for the top 10 list. And that list will be released a little later today. I'll be really interested in people's feedback, and some of the topics are on the biotech area as well. But today's session is about biotech in China and the great changes that are occurring. And I thought it might be useful if I just took a minute and set a framework a bit for some of the things that are going on. And I'm going to look down just to read so I don't mistake some of the numbers. So rapidly aging societies in Asia and elsewhere are driving up higher healthcare bills. And I found some interesting statistics from a report that I just thought I would share to you. 200 million Chinese people will be 60 in the year 2020, so coming right up, just to give you a picture on how society is changing. 1 in 4 new global cases of cancer already occur in China. 100 million people in China have diabetes, the largest such community in the world. And China also has a very large drug and biotech sector, which is now growing in response to that. These changes, as our societies are aging, are putting increasing pressure on governments and societies to respond with innovations so that we can all live longer and healthier lives. And that will support our well-being in ways that, I should add, we can all afford, because it's really important that we will all have access to any of the technologies that we develop. So can technologies help us achieve our goals of, as the society is aging, living longer and better lives? And I think everybody in this room probably would like to smile and say yes, but how we do that will be up to us and society to judge. And I think our distinguished panelists here will have a lot to say about that. China is now moving quite strongly in this direction. You will have seen maybe in the program that last year 30% of all investments into US biotech startups came from Chinese venture funds, that the Hong Kong Stock Exchange issued its first pre-commercial biotech IPOs, and US regulators for the first time approved a new cancer drug developed by a company from China. So how will China's changes in biotech, how will this powerhouse influence the rest of how the world is working? We're going to explore those issues now, and I'll introduce the panelists. And I just want to remind everybody that we'll have a good amount of time for questions after we've had a bit of a discussion on stage, and I will really welcome your thoughts and your opinions at that time. So I'm going to introduce this way, and then I'm going to ask you each in a minute to share some thoughts. So Xu Xun is President Research for BGI, here in the People's Republic of China. I'll come right back to you in a minute. Next to him is Jackson Xu Weiyan, Chief Executive Officer and Founder, Biomed, in the People's Republic of China. And then closest to me is Cong Yali, Professor, Department of Medical Ethics and Health Law at Peking University, here in the People's Republic of China. I'd like to start with you, Xu. So I think it would be really useful if we gave people a sense of the landscape. And I'd like to turn to you to talk a little bit about your role and what you're seeing.
Yes. So I'm come from Genomic Institute, BGI. We started in 1999 for Human Genome Project. So from my point of view, what it looks like for China biotech is that it's growing quickly in a lot of cutting-edge areas, including genomic, stem cell, and synthetic biology, and all these areas, cutting-edge areas. We see that the innovation is growing quickly, and there's a lot of startups focused on these areas. And there's also a quick growth, not only in biotechnology, only in a lot of crossover between biotech and IT, for example, digital health. I believe that this area in China is growing quickly, and this also brings a lot of problems. For example, ethics is one of the issues, and also the kind of how to encouraging people participates in this research, in this innovation, because you need people to willing to join this research program is another issues. Yeah, this is something I'm looking in this area.
Thank you. Jackson, if you would, I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. There's no doubt that China increased the horsepower for the healthcare innovation, and especially in the area like AI digital, including the medical AI and the digital pathology. And because of given the huge number of Chinese patients and the medical data, so we should be prepared also to, in that area, to be the global pilot or global leader in that sector. So actually, as the council member of the World Economic Forum, I'm also facilitating a pilot study in China in the digital pathology area. So which means that we could also to look at a new pathway in terms of the regulatory approval pathway and the governance and the policy change to really to benefit to the patients in China and also the worldwide. Thank you.
I'm a professor. I'm not a scientist. No business out company. So my role is for teaching and research, and I come from medical ethics. So this is one branch of philosophy. I think my role should be to help the biotech community scientists to do self-reflection. So self-reflection doesn't mean to criticize, but means critical thinking. So I have seen some very rapid progress. I know just recently that one doctor in one of our affiliated hospitals have done a great job in the leukemia. I think it's really good. And also I know one cancer drug, very successful. But I think generally we still unprocessed. There are so many drugs, devices unprocessed, but the community not yet have a way to do self-reflection. So I think my role is just to help to do something in this aspect.
Thank you. So I'd like to pick up on that for just a minute. You mentioned so many drugs, and what are, so for people who are not so familiar about, what are we talking about in biotechnology today and what's so exciting? Shun, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about biologics and what are we talking about?
Yeah, in my view, the biotechnology is covering from the research part, like cutting edge technology, like genomic, a lot of other omics, stem cell, those kind of part, and also about the translational research that's bring the technology into industry, including like big data, the precision medicine, and also in the final stage in the application side, like drug development or final kind of like a diagnosis and therapeutic products. So it's a much broader areas, not only focused on the industry, but also through the very beginning, the research side, all the way to the final product industry.
No, I'd like to also ask you all, while we're setting the stage here for the conversation to follow, what are you very excited about now when it comes to biotechnology development in China? And what's keeping you up at night? What are you worried about?
I think currently one thing we worry about is there's a lot of conflict reason now on the ethic part, reason the gene editing baby. And also there's a lot of new regulation comes out. So I think there's still lack of enough conversation between the researchers and regulation or government agencies and the whole society. So it's better to have more conversation and debate with each other before any movement. So I think there's still lack of enough communication.
Mm-hmm. I know many people have said technology is neutral.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It could be good or not good. Mm-hmm. It really depends on how we decide to use it.
Yes.
I think that's wise. Yeah.
And that's why a lot of general public will be a little bit worried about those kind of things, to be afraid of this new technology. But actually, it's helping. It has a bad side. It also have a good side. But this education to the public is really an important issue right now for the cutting-edge technology and biotechnology.
What's exciting to you, Jackson, and what's keeping you up at night?
Yeah, I think I'm more from the industry and the business side. I can see clear trend also to your point. The regulatory is very critical, and China need more to integrate into the global regulatory environment. But nevertheless, I can see the clear motivation or trend happen in the national regulatory agency like NMPA, which is a Chinese FDA. So couple of examples which is very good to the industry. So China is now more embrace the truly innovation. So used to we have to start a clinical phase 2 in China, but now it's for truly innovation product we can have a silent approval and to start with the stage 1, which is very good to helping international company to think about to start a global multi-center trial at the earliest possible, including China, which giving China also the very good opportunity to also to leverage with the global R&D power, which I think is the Chinese is very good for the engineering and to develop application. But in terms of the basic science, we still need more learn or to integrate into the global level. So this I think is encourage the people or industry to really to start more what's the regulatory change and what can the business strategy to adapt into those changes. Yeah.
Yali, I'd like to hear from you too.
So what's exciting? Yes, I just mentioned some new drug, cancer, but also I think just my colleague mentioned that the data, big data, health data, I also find so many sessions in this forum, so many topics about focus on this. So according to my interview, I have done some interview to doctors. I think China should be excited because we have so huge data, especially in hospital. So we are excited, but the doctors, on the one side, they are excited, but on the other side, they don't know how to use this. They worried, they are worried some legal responsibility or ethical responsibility. So I think that is one conflict is there. So another one, I think I can find from public. From public, if we say it's represent the new technology, it can help the health communities to find the new way to treatment. I think the public, most public will be most excited. They don't have any conflict. They are just excited. They are waiting for. So I think in China now, so the biggest concern is just like Jackson mentioned, is governance. Because the conflict faced by the doctors, they have data, but they don't know how to use this. I think the governance something lag behind. But it's not only the fault of the governance because the biotech, it means faster development. I don't think any law can catch up in time. So they must be left behind. So the point is how the governance can respond quickly, can collect the different stakeholders' opinions, especially the responsible opinions, not only be driven by the innovation. I think the many doctors, they are driven by innovation. They are driven by the evaluation system, but still, I think inherently behind them, they still vary a lot. So that's, I think, something conflict. Yeah.
So we've heard about some excitement, areas of growth, new drugs coming, fast change, trying to embrace an innovation culture, new tools, AI, other technologies, and yet these concerns around, are we moving so fast that we're moving too fast? Yes. How can regulation possibly keep up? We know it can't. So what are some of the things we need to be aware of there? Big data, we talked about the power of big data. There's also, at least in some areas, concerns around privacy and how we're using that data to its best effect. And I'd like to pick it up a bit. So now I'd like to go a little deeper in some of the issues that the panelists raised and pick up on that idea of governance. So this rise of biotech in China and investment, because there have been some changes recently in some of the regulations. Could maybe Jackson, maybe you'd like to speak to what's been happening recently?
Yeah, and I would say for the drug approval side, it's a very clear trend is China is catching up to motivate the truly innovation, to encourage this truly drug innovation to be first-in-class conduct in China. And, but I also can see in the other side, like medical AI or the medical device side, there's still some room to improve, which is also give us the opportunity, like you mentioned, we cannot rely on the authority to do everything for the industry. It's very difficult. So probably the non-profit organization like World Economic Forum or the industry or the institute can play also another important role. Thinking about like a new pathway, as example, so how can we leverage the future 5G, which is coming soon, to adapt our current model, healthcare model into the more cloud service base. So to set up some really innovative, even from regulatory perspective, how to look at the cloud service can really benefit in a certain way to control the risk, to also to leverage the power of the cloud service given the 5G. So could be another way to think about. So I think that and the industry, institute, NGO, work together with the government will be very powerful. So for me, I believe so next Google level of the big company in the healthcare sector may be happening in China, if we are truly believe we are innovation.
Shun, you look like you have something to add.
Yes, I see a very positive side for the recent dynamic change on the regulation in China in the drug and all the therapeutic approvement. So I think because the technology is and the innovation in China is going so dramatically, so traditionally Chinese FDA is just copy everything from US FDA. But they changed the name from FDA into NMPA. It's not only changing on the name, it's also changing in a lot of their policies. So they are trying to improve, to catching up, for example, the cell therapy, to catching up the big genomic data. So for example, in the genomic areas, for a lot of new diagnosis method, they trying to using a word they call real world data to approve those diagnoses, because some of those diagnoses it's not being approved before, but it has been already used in hospital, have accumulated a lot of data. And there's a lot of things in hypothesis they should be work, but if you want to get approval using traditional clinical trials, you won't able to get enough data. So I think they're trying to encouraging people to move into the real world and collecting data, and then further evaluate those kind of product. So I think they're moving in a really good way to encouraging innovation in biotechnology.
So we've talked about regulatory bodies changing a bit and the role of organizations like the World Economic Forum to help foster conversations. Yali, you also talked about the need to reflect for the research community. Would you like to add a bit on that?
Yeah, I would like to reflect, sure. So not only from the current governance, they are changing, updating, but I'm thinking more historically and from culture aspects, I think. So I think China scientists, in my perspective and in my knowledge, may be very limited. So Chinese scientists, they work very hard. They are diligent. They are talented. They are smart. And they are driven by some sense to catch up. Just because in the last century, even 2 centuries ago, I think China have caused by some war or by some other events that make China's scientists speed be stopped. So I think the whole nation, whole scientist community, they have a sense to catch up. So that means speed is a very important factor. How to catch up, how to go fast, how to innovate, and also driven by their demand of the patients, but also driven by the evaluation system currently. So I don't want to criticize anything about evaluation system. There's some problem there. But I mean, if we want to do deep reflection, I think why some Chinese scientists, they work in this way. They have done a lot, but also we have to say, we have also raised some scandals during the progress. So that's, I think, being as a professor, you want to do critical thinking. We have to think about this. I think not only from scientists, but also common people, public. That means scientific is something same with good. That means, this idea already 100 years history. So I think this is we have to reflect. So that means, so if we say to the public, this biotechnology can have potential benefit to treat some diabetes, to some high pressure, some heart disease, I think the public will support totally. But still, we have to have this concern. So this concern, I think I also have think that this concern, that means our way of governance. I think 2 ways of governance, at least internationally. One way, just go ahead if no evidence to show risk. Another way is don't go ahead if we have some evidence, it's benefit. So I think China is something like the first way. I mean, this way both exist globally, but because we are historical background and we take this way of thinking that must have something ethical guidelines, even the legal guidelines left behind. So what I mean is, I don't think any country have a perfect governance, but if China have this way, we have to think our weak points. That means we need to have enough resources to make a risk evaluation. We can go ahead, but we have to keep in mind, to alert seriously, what's the risk evaluation, how you can supervise this, how you can make something to ensure some of the safety of the public. I think that's, if we use this way of thinking our governance, we have to think more about this side, then can help our governance, our governance source be better. So that's my small academic, I think.
No. I think that's really interesting and important because, as we said before, any technology offers a good side and a bad side to it. And sometimes technologies make us uncomfortable for lots of reasons. But we shouldn't, we should find ways to maximize the positives. If either of you want to add something, please do. But I think it's a really important point.
Yeah, I have something to add on that part. So we all know that technology has both sides. Sometimes people believe that you need have like a regulation laws to clearly to point out what is the red line. But that has a problem, as already mentioned earlier, that the law is always behind the cutting edge research. So that leaves a lot of like what we call green zones. So how we solve the problem in those green zones. So we had an interesting workshop a month ago in Shenzhen, talking about what is scientists' roles in those research, in those cutting edge technology. We believe that scientists always has crazy idea. That's not a problem. But scientists also have its social responsibility. So I think before we didn't put too much too much attention on the scientist's social responsibility. So in the workshop name we call it responsible innovation. So it's not only in the scientists, the researchers like community, it's also in a big community, including the funding agency, the researchers, and all these technicians, all this like a society, the institution, all has to be as a community to take those responsibility. So I think it's good to have debate, to have disagreement in the cutting edge areas, but at least we have to have a conversation. The scientific conference meetings, not only talking about innovation technology, it's also need to talking about what is scientists' its own responsibility, social responsibilities. I think that part has to be further expanded in the future. When the technology is really moving very fast, we need more responsibility from scientists community.
I think these are excellent points about risks inherent in any new technology, and especially one that affects people's lives. I'd like to switch tracks just to get a few other ideas in the air before we turn to the audience questions in a few minutes. We talked a bit about the risks of biotechnologies with people, with challenges, maybe even ethically we talked about. How about, it's also by its nature a rather risky business for investors because you can't guarantee the changes that you might see. Would you maybe like to comment on that? How should we be aware of that risk or be resilient in the face of it? Because we do need these innovations.
Yeah, I would say from the investor's point of view, of course, they need to do the proper due diligence from the technology side, also including ethical risk and the regulatory pathway, which is normal. So by definition, venture capitalists take a risk. But I would say if we think about how the Chinese innovation to shape the global landscape, we also need to also pay more attention on the talent. So which means both sides. So we need to really have a talent to have an intercultural skill to managing the multinational company business in China or the R&D in China. And also if the Chinese company or even startup company, if they want to have a more acceptance outside of China, have a higher success rate of the drug approval. So we also need someone to understand the intercultural differences. So in my view, probably the best way as a Chinese company is better to hire the local talent in local market, not necessarily to managing all the business whole like a commercialization loop by the Chinese. So, but then we need someone to really understand what exactly means the intercultural differences, how to manage those risks challenges in local market. So I would say from the investor point of view, if we can have a technology right, talents right, find the proper business strategy, I think it's a good invest.
And how about facing other mature markets in EU, the United States, and so on? If you're hiring some local talent, how do you build those bridges?
So we need to look at in the different segment. So I would say for the, in terms of the like innovation drug business, I would say the local talent to help you to connect with the FDA, EMEA will be critical. And also to managing the, I would say, the local market expectation, like a speed. Sometimes we're talking too much China speed, but if you apply just China speed into the mature market, sometimes doesn't work. So we need managing the expectation from many perspectives. And also the, if we talk about like AI digital stuff, so I think it's, China can be the powerhouse of the data to do some larger validation study much quicker, much faster in China, but we still need to have a good collaboration with the leading institute outside of China for basic research. So could be, I would say, integrate, I would say, is the right word.
I think it might be nice at this point, actually, because I think we've put a lot of ideas in the air to give the audience a chance to ask. I have lots of more questions myself, but maybe you all might like the opportunity as well. I see a hand up in the front of the room here, just right in front of me. There's somebody with a mic. And when you ask your question, if you could just say where you're from, that might help the panelists, and also if you're addressing it to a particular person or to the whole group.
Sure, Mariette Jepson, open water tech pioneer at this meeting. I was struck in what you were saying, how doctors take a Hippocratic oath, but the scientists, and not just the scientists, all of us that develop biotech and medtech do not. And I was also, as you were thinking about Kaizen and an organization in a manufacturing plant. Any single person working on that plant can stop the plant if something's gone wrong. And I wonder if we could take sort of a combination of those two ideas, the Hippocratic Oath that doctors take, and the ability for anyone in the organization to say, stop, something, we have to rethink this. Since, as Cong described, the legislation can't keep up, how do we create something almost like the billionaires with a giving pledge, like they like, we all pledge, like, could we make it cool? I don't know what you thought. You've thought of all of this more deeply, but I wonder about those three ideas and a combination that can help us get in front of this.
Interesting question. Someone like to, would you like to start,
Yeah,
Yali?
I'd like to respond first, Anika. Yeah, how to, I think because we cannot rely on regulation sometimes. So I think from the scientific community, they have to self-discipline. So self-discipline, I think, different levels. First one, that the individual scientists, they have to have opportunities to access to enough education. That means some such education should be provided by university, association, government level. And also I think that not only individual scientists, but the team of scientists, they should have some science to remind each other, and also the national. But what I want to see is during the innovation process, I agree with Xun, yes, responsible innovation. Responsible innovation means you already go fast. You don't know what's the regulation, what's the boundary. So you have to find some right place to raise consensus. So the communities, not only your own lab, but the national communities and also global one. So my observation, and maybe not right, but you can correct me, that means previous years or previous decades, Chinese scientists' voice was not heard enough. That means some international organization, when they drafting some guidelines, now I don't think how enough Chinese scientists be invited. But another, I know Chinese scientists, they usually they are modest. They don't speak, only if they have very, very sure what they said is right. So that is something weak point, I think. But globally, I think we should know each other. Globally, know what's a Chinese scientist. Chinese scientists should raise globally. I think how to rely on this way can do something better. That's my, yeah.
So it's interesting, technology has two sides, but on the other way, when people looking at those new things have two different views. One is believe that we should not touching that. But those kind of view will stop innovation. Like for a lot of new technology, when we come to for example, China FDA, they say they don't think it works. They should not do that. But on the other side, there's a lot of people think, it's a good thing. So I think there's a lot of have a lot of kind of debate on those new things. And then we have a better understanding, because those disagreement is probably come from different background or different knowledge on the certain things. So I think, regulation is kind of framework, and the judgment have to come from the communication. I think there's there's not a clear ways to solve those problems, but at least keep conversation between different parties from this biotech innovation is important to make sure that we are not killing a good technology and we are not let evil things go out.
Yeah, I just add, so for those innovation to do the pilot could be the best way to managing, balance the risk, and also don't kill the idea. Actually, the Chinese is very good to do the pilot. We do the pilot in the Shenzhen, then open to the whole country, to the world, and we did very successful. I think we should think about more to do the proper pilot in the selected region, selected segment, monitored by the different bodies. So this could be a nice way to move forward.
Oh, there's one right here. Please wait for the microphone because we're live streaming. Thank you. Thank you.
Rely on the technology then. So my name is John Kao. One of the hats I wear is I'm senior advisor to a group called the Occam Global Group that specializes in executive search for life sciences. I want to drill down a little bit more on the talent topic. And since the word innovation has been used a lot, innovation happens when entrepreneurial forces and human capital are unleashed in a way, and we're in a world where financial capital is pretty abundant and intellectual capital is pretty abundant, but human capital, at least from a US perspective, the hardest thing is finding the unicorn person who can create success from the ingredients. I'm wondering how it works in China in terms of the talent ecosystem. Are you perceiving a talent gap? How does it work in terms of finding the exceptional, interculturally sensitive, business, scientific, et cetera, mind who can deal with regulatory stuff? I mean, how does the talent equation work in China?
So in my view, because of we keep exchanging the students between China, US, Europe, so I would say from the researcher point of view, we do have good talents available, good talents pool, which is set very good foundation for welcome any global innovation to do the work in China. But we still lack of the a business talent. In my point, it's people to have intercultural skill to really understand the different dynamic in the different market. This one we just started. So few very successful Chinese company, they overseas business is more than the domestic business. So we started, I would say.
I saw there's a big fight in China for talent. So it's a fight between different cities in China. You know, different city has released a policy to attract the talents. Like Shenzhen really give a very good policy for staying in Shenzhen, like taxi and all these good policies. And also a fight between for talent in different countries because, you know, as we have mentioned earlier at the beginning of this session, the investment and the innovation biotech company in China is growing. So suddenly all the companies are trying to fighting for the best talent. So it's really a big fight there. The quality of the talent pool in China right now is significantly increased and improved. But the issue in China is that because we just started in this field, so we lack of enough experienced talent. So we have a lot of young people get high degree of education background, move back to China to start a new company. But in these fields, this experienced people is still a problem. Experienced people is not in the high tech part. It's also experienced people in certain kind of areas of technician. Is kind of because in China, you know, that's a serious problem. The technicians, for their career path, they have to be an officer, you know, to get a higher salary. So people won't stay in certain kind of areas in dealing with technology for a long time. So we saw the structure, we have a problem. And I think that's why there's the education systems and the career path environment is the next challenge in China.
Thank you. There's one in the second row here, in the front. Thank you.
谢谢。我是
Thank you. I'm a reporter from China Economist News. My question is raised from the perspective of a user or a patient. So if my data is collected by you, how am I certain about the future risks I'm exposed to? And are you going to pay me for my data?
Answer this question first. So there's a new law has been released recently. So that's for the China genetic resource regulation laws, and it's actually put into effectively today. So for that law, it's clearly point out for the research purpose, if you collect those data, you have to follow, for example, you have to have a consent form. The consent form it has all the information and the rights the researchers will take, and the participants will give up. And it's also, if you don't want to participate in the future, you can just ask the researchers to destroy it. And there's also a very important part about privacy issues in that law, how to protect the privacy if you're collecting the genetic data. So I think the regulation environment in China to protect the personal data is become more and more mature. Still on its way, but become more and more mature. And on the other side, the researchers, the scientists, and all these institute and the funding agencies all aware of that, because that's a very hot topic in the community, that how to protect the privacy and protect the rights of the participants, how to make sure that people won't hurt by that. I think that Professor Cong has more.
Okay, yeah. I think, it's a good question. So depends on the activities difference. So if you are a consumer, you want to test your gene sequencing. You want to know something risk of some special disease, especially if your family have some disease genetically. So I think if the customer, you pay, not they pay you pay for the customer, but the customer have to promise they have to protect your data. Another kind of activity, I think, at least research. If you involve a research, I think that's related to you mentioned informed consent. So informed consent, how to describe something in detail. So the new regulation just released and effective today, and require how to inform the subject or patient very, very in detail. You cannot say, I just collect this and will use for the future. You cannot say this word. You have to say how long I need to protect, where I need to store, and what kind of disease I will to use your data. And if some others, you need to be connected again. So I think, yeah, usually for research, it's not pay, it's for volunteer.
So we've heard about the great talent search, about concerns around data, which is really important, I think, especially because there's just so much of it. And it talks about everything in our lives, in our bodies, and so on. So it's really encouraging news. Are there any other questions before I grill them more? There's a gentleman right about in the middle there.
Jerry Mueller, I'm a professor of history from Washington, D.C. I have a somewhat skeptical question. A number of you have talked about AI and big data and how transformative it's going to be. At many of the sessions here and much of what one reads in the newspapers and so on, there's a tremendous amount of discussion about this. And I often wonder how much of it is hype. That is to say, to what extent the promise of AI and big data in the fields that we're dealing with is far ahead of the actual practical results. So for example, when you take the self-driving car, I have a saying I made up a couple of weeks ago, the self-driving car is always right around the corner. That is to say, the more research is done on it, the less close it seems to be in terms of solving the problems of actually getting there. When I've spoken to scientists in the field of biotech research, or people who follow this carefully, some of them say that since the mapping of the human genome, there actually haven't been any drugs that have come to market that are based on AI, big data, and the human genome. Is that correct? I'd be thrilled if you gave me some examples that have been produced in China or elsewhere that are actual results of this. So so that's my question. How much of this is still promise and how much of it is reality?
I think it's for the medical AI, the imaging-based AI, which is like using the CT scan or using the digital pathology slides, which is, I would say, is very close to the market. So clearly, AI is much more quantitative and smart than the people's eyes. So that one, I would say, more mature. In terms of the drug development using the genomic data, in my view, probably correct me, I'm wrong. So we still have a bigger, I would say, effort need to be done for bioinformatics. So we got raw data of genomic data, but try to understand what's the biological behind those data. I would say we still probably understand less 10%. So I think this is not really it is again, but I think if we have really to give, which is another section is happening at another end is health data. If we really can share the data, share the personalized genomic data or medical record, everything, because the big data is not only the numbers, but also different dimensions, angles. If we really can share using for really to improve the bioinformatics use for drug development, will take a couple of years, in my view.
I think people are always too optimistic when a new technology comes out, but will be too, won't see the long-term impact of technology. You know, when the first the Human Genome Project was finished, people believed that it promised a new drug. But actually, the Human Genome Project did not offer new drugs, but at least offer a knowledge or the framework for the development of the new drugs. But believe it or not, you know, after the Human Genome Project, in just 10 years, it brings $1 trillion economic size in US because of the Human Genome Project. So I think there's a lot of drug was developed based on the hint from the genomic. For example, a lot of rare disease drugs was come out from the knowledge of the genome. There's a lot of cancer, like what they call target drugs, came from the sequencing of the cancer patient. So, but that won't solve all the problem. That's giving a better knowledge of what genetic impact is and what is targeted for. But still needs a lot of knowledge from the other side to be able to release a drug.
I think this is one of the essential challenges of basic research, isn't it?
Yeah.
We know it's going to tell us something. How exactly we're going to use that something that we just learned isn't always quite clear at the beginning. I know when Einstein was working on his theories of relativity, he didn't expect people would use them in their phones for the GPS, right? So that's 100 years ago. Sometimes it takes a while. But biotech is moving a bit faster than that. Any other questions that folks would like to ask? Another gentleman in the front.
Hello. You can hear me? Yes.
Yes.
I'm Jesus Mantas. I work with IBM, and I also sit in the board of directors of Biogen. So I get to see two different cultures. One that comes from the technology to the application. The other one that comes from the biology to the patient. What will it take to create this next generation of leadership that intersects these two fields? The biology side with the technology side. What will it take from academia? What will it take from the research community? And what will it take from the private sector to bridge this gap, which from my perspective, it seems to be still two islands connected through a bridge that is very narrow?
So there's actually, we see there's 3 different stages: basic research, translational research, and application. So normally, the funding agencies and the industries always focused on either the research or the application. The translational research always being a part, you know, it's a kind of neglected. And it's really difficult to say that, oh, I'm specifically working on the translational research. A lot of people are more focused on, you know, what breakthrough I find, what application I'm working on. The translational research is not only needs the technology and you know, from the basic science, and also needs the knowledge from the application. This also needs the knowledge to bridging the gap. So I think we probably lack of enough talents in bridging the gaps. That's my point of view.
I think you raise very, very critical, good point. So we need a cross-border talent to understand both sides, which, like your point, to focus more on the translational development medicine. So, and I can see probably 2 ways to try to improve that situation. One is we can form a more international translational medicine team to leverage both our strengths. China probably very good to develop the applications and or to do the engineering or using the bigger patient pool and medical data. But for the leading institute outside of China, probably very good to understand biological mechanism, which is something I think is China still behind. So if we can form the international team to set up the international co-development project, could be somehow solve this problem. And I saw a couple of cases already happen.
So yeah, I really like this question. Yes, I think these two islands, but also I think how to be one island to go first. So this forum, I found the name called the Young Generation Leadership. So leadership usually just something misleading, at least in some Chinese. So leadership just means you lead to do something. But if the evaluation system doesn't give the due credit to the contributor, I think that's a problem. So leadership, I think the definition, its true definition already covers, you should have perspective, you should take responsibility, you should take something first, you should to have other contributors and give other contributors their due credits. So I think the applied biotech, that means they should go first because they have something need, because they are close more to the customer. They know the needs and the demand from there. And the biology island, they don't have this emergent need. So I think this island should do something first and have to collect the different stakeholders and give their due benefits, how to share something, how to respect some others.
I just want to add a concept that Bernard Meyerson of IBM, since you mentioned IBM, mentioned to me, which is the notion of T-shaped people in your talent pool, which I see you're nodding. Yeah, yeah. And so this is the idea that somebody would have some depth, so that's the deep part of the T, but also the communication ability to reach across. And I've always really loved that framework because it crystallizes for me what some of the best communicators can do. They have some depth of knowledge, but they can reach across. So we're almost near time, and I think I just wanted to ask you all one last thing. So we've talked about a lot of issues, and just to help people in the room, if you could give them one thing to take away from this conversation, what would you like people to when they leave here to go and think about? Do you want to start, Yali? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I also, because Mariette have let us to prepare this question before. so I think what I want to say, yes, biology technology is a two-edged sword. So what I want to say, we have a Chinese saying called 成也萧何,败也萧何. That means it's just one person who can make something success, but also can make something failed. So that means who can make the biotech successful, he can also make it a failure. But responsible innovation, I think the scientific community, they have to undertake some responsibility. So that's my word. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will encourage the true innovation. Thinking about China is the right time, and also thinking about the future of China. I firmly believe the next level of the Google will be happening in the healthcare sector, and probably China have better chance.
So in China, it's the hottest area right now still the IT fields. But I strongly believe that IT fields, people's needs will someday will be fully filled. But for BT field, I think it's have a much bigger economic size and needs because there's no one think they have enough health. So I believe that BT, the biotech, is even larger economic size compared to IT and other areas.
So there you have it. We've talked a lot about the promises of biotech cures, moving quickly, helping more of us live longer, better lives at a price maybe I hope we can all afford. We've talked about the talents that we need to bridge the gaps. I thought these were really great points and probably something we don't think enough about. What sort of educational tools are needed? And that brings me, of course, to the questions around more conversations, especially around difficult topics, to avoid what Shun said was killing a really good technology or letting some evil out. You don't want either of those things to happen. But I think I'd like to rest it on what Yali just said to us, which is the one-person idea can help us succeed or fail. Maybe each of us can take from this the notion that we would be on the side of trying to help things succeed in the best way they possibly can. I'd like to invite you to, with me, celebrate the panelists for their wonderful contributions today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.